Hello, and welcome to the Trumped Up Podcast. I am your host, Keith Rao. This is Season 2, Episode 10, Systemic Racism, Injustice, and Defunding the Police. So, I'm going to say something that's a little controversial, more so than some of the things I normally would say, but if policing in other institutions, such as education and so on, and the government are systematically racist and unjust, the sad part of that is most of these places are actually run by Democrats, liberals, and progressives, making the direct cause of the problem those same people that are crying the system's racist, unjust, and targets people. It also makes it obvious that voting for these politicians and leaders is actually voting against changes to the system they claim is racist and unjust. Your best bet would vote for change, but in places like the state I live in, Massachusetts, they consistently, over and over and over again, vote for Democrats. Or in New York City or California, and several of the other places. As a matter of fact, Minneapolis, where the George Floyd incident happened, was run by Democrats. So they are in charge of the system that they claim is against them. Which, if you look deeper into statistics, the narrative and the statistics totally are different. The statistics show one thing, which is facts and statistics, and it's not the message the media is putting out there to you. The thing with the media is that they profit and they get ratings based on sensationalism. Like CNN just posted the other day, their highest ratings in like 15 years because they're covering these protests and the George Floyd memorials and people like Al Sharpton and his crazy race hustling that he's been doing for years, but the guy has never changed a damn thing in his life, and I'm still curious as to why nobody's ever tracked him down to pay his taxes, which makes him a criminal. But it is what it is, so be it. That's not for me. Now, President Trump should have came out. He did a good job with the speech he did on Saturday, but a lot of people probably didn't see it, despite everybody should have been watching, because it was historic for the U.S. to send 2 U.S. astronauts back into space on a private spacecraft created by SpaceX, owned by Elon Musk, and we haven't done this in a long time. We've been hitching rides with the Russians, these people that we're supposed to be so worried about, but we're hitching a ride at $86 million an astronaut with them to outer space, which, if we have no way to go into space, what is the Space Force going to do? That's my question. Don't we need to have our own spacecraft? Well, yet again, the public-private sector working together is going to solve that problem. But that's a whole nother episode altogether, probably, as to why it is as it is. So, if you want to go out and dig deeper and actually go past the biased media and dig deep for statistics, if you follow a lot of conservative people, especially black conservatives on the internet, they will point out the actual statistics and how the system isn't racist, including Bob Woodson, I believe his name is, who was in the original civil rights movement with Martin Luther King back in the day. And he pointed out how the system isn't all that racist. You can probably go to Tucker Carlson's page on Fox News and check that out. It was a really enlightening interview, and we need more people like this to get out there. But if he was on CNN, they suddenly would have found technical difficulties and they would have cut him off because it wouldn't have fit their narrative. But Fox News doesn't do this for the most part. They've gone downhill a little bit recently. They are the media. They have their own narrative as well. But I tend to watch more of their opinion commentators as opposed to their news coverage. Like, I was yelling at my TV this morning because the president was coming out talking and Sandra Smith wouldn't shut up as he was already starting to speak, and she should have just went to the president, but she just wanted to babble on for an extra 30 seconds over the president, which is just totally disrespectful, period. So Joe Biden, Sleepy Creepy Joe, recently said to Charlemagne the God, a podcaster, another podcaster other than myself. I've never listened to his show except for this interview that I've seen in the media, that if you're black and you don't vote for Joe Biden, then you ain't black. Number one, Joe Biden's a white man who can't tell a black person if they're black or not. Only genetics can tell you if you're black or not. You may identify as a black person, because I don't know if that's a thing today. The Rachel Dolezal lady did that, but I don't think you can just identify as a black person. You either are black or you're not black. You're white or you're not white. You're Latino or you're not Latino, or Asian or Native American or whatever. As Liz Warren identified as a Native American, and old Pocahontas proved to herself that, there was just this little bit, which could have meant some Native American spit on her way back in the day, and that's where it came from. I don't know. It was so minuscule that it's ridiculous. But yeah, nobody can determine your race for you. You either are or you are not, based on genetics, like many other things are determined by genetics. It's just science. It's proven science, unlike climate hysteria science, which is just out there in the other realms of the world. Which brings me to Bernie Sanders, who actually said this protesting and this craziness and the riots in the streets, all this probably wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump did something about climate change. That's like one of the most delusional things I've heard in a long time. But Bernie, I don't know. I think he needs a mental health test, because he's totally, I won't say he's totally losing his mind, because he's always been this crazy. So we should just see how crazy he really is by having him take these tests. I think all politicians should have to take a mental health evaluation, because if you're a certain kind of crazy, you shouldn't be running the country. Yeah, and I believe it was yesterday when he was out pandering for black votes, Biden made another one of his gaffes, as they call him, but no, it's just who he is. It's just his stupidity, that 10 to 15% of people, all people, are not very good people. If you understand there's between 320 million and like 350 million, if not more, people in this country due to illegal immigration, that's roughly between 32 and 50 million people are not very good people, which is ridiculous considering the entire prison population in America is 2.5% of the population. So I don't know where he came up with this math, but that's about equivalent to saying that every Republican voter is not a very good person. That falls into the Hillary's basket of deplorables and all these other crazy generalizations that the Democrats always seem to make. Now, Biden was also responsible for the 1994 crime bill, which led to a massive increase of black people being incarcerated. But now he's pandering to black people like he never did this. He's trying to ignore it. The media won't talk about it. But anybody who's followed politics for quite a while would understand that this is the result of the 1994 crime bill. Due to Biden's faltering support of law enforcement and the crazy ideas he keeps coming up with and moving more progressively to the left, he's now lost the support of many police unions, which is a big part of the voting class of America. Which takes me to, I see thousands and thousands of people in the streets protesting, but it makes me wonder how many of these people actually vote. Because you can scream for change all you want, but if you don't do anything to change the problem, yes, A lot of people think my vote doesn't matter, but yes, your vote does matter, especially in smaller city elections and town elections and state elections and things that you can affect more. And if there's a ballot initiative, like Massachusetts voters actually voted to legalize marijuana on their own. They didn't rely on the state legislature, which would have never did it. Although Democrats go, yet again, saying, oh, we need to reduce crime, but they make stupid things like inhaling pot of crime. So yeah, if you want to talk about people being unfairly targeted, since 1937, pot smokers have been unfairly and unjustly targeted for putting something into their body. You could also say that about prostitutes or just trying to make a buck with their body, but that's just the more independent side of me. But that also goes to the people who support abortion. Oh, my body, my choice. Okay, the pothead can say that. The meth addict can say that. The prostitute can say that. The guy that wants to torture himself and do weird things. And yeah, you can take any political statement, which takes me to, why are they calling abortion reproductive rights? Because it sounds better, because it's the exact opposite of reproductive rights. It's stopping reproduction. Yet again, science. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back with more of the Trumped Up Podcast. Hey, you too can join the podcasting world and be one of the greatest podcasters out there. Build an audience, get sponsorships, earn money, and do many, many interesting things. You can also get listener support to help sponsor your show, all by using Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to become a podcaster. Anyone can do it. If you got something to say, or someone thinks you got something to say, or you just want to say something, come and join Anchor and join the podcasting revolution. Hey, welcome back to the Trumped Up Podcast, Season 2, Episode 10, Systemic Racism, Injustice, and Defunding the Police. See, the Democrats have been crying about change and saying the system's unfair and all these things for decades. I mean, they've been playing the identity politics game since the 50s, if not before that, probably even before then. I don't know how long it goes back. It's a really long time. It's an old book and it's outdated, and we're nowhere near as divided as they would like us to think. My next question also is, I hear when these unfortunate events happen, what the police officer did to George Floyd was entirely wrong and disgusting, and it was definitely not right, and it should have never happened. But I don't hear the Spanish and the Latino community saying they're unjustly targeted. Is it because they're all armed? Or is it just because they don't have that belief, or they don't think they're being treated differently? I don't know. Something to ponder, something for all of us to ponder. But yeah, the Democrats always are talking about changing things, but they talked about changing like criminal justice reform for years. And President Trump actually enacted criminal justice reform after years of Democrats talking about it with little or no action. And many people in the African American and other minority communities actually benefited from this. People in minority communities also have benefited from by creating economic opportunity zones where private and public partnership, yet again, is helping people invest into businesses in low-income neighborhoods to help people rise up and have a better life and move into the middle class and into better neighborhoods with less crime and just fix up the blight of a lot of these inner cities, which have been run down and run into the ground for decades by poor Democratic leadership. Yet again, the systematic injustice by them. President Trump also has secured long-term funding for historic black colleges. Before he secured it for multiple years, the historic black colleges would have to come to Washington, D.C. and beg every year, just like the first responders from 9/11 had to keep coming. But he also got that funding for a longer period of time, so they don't have to keep coming back to beg for money or to keep these policies in place to help them. Before the pandemic hit, Trump and his administration and their policies also led to records for the lowest unemployment number in every minority class out there, including people also as well as people with no high school diplomas and disabled Americans. Now we're going to get to the craziest idea I have heard recently. It's to defund and or abolish all police in America. I don't think most of the people that support that idea understand the world they would live in if that existed. They might want to think a little more deeply about what they're asking for. If you believe this philosophy of defunding and abolishing the police, you have to either be totally crazy or a criminal to support these ideas. Do we need reforms like banning chokeholds and better standards for police? Yes. Of course we do. We can always improve in every aspect of our life, personally and otherwise. Defunding or abolishing the police will also lead to increases of crime, especially in inner cities, and the very neighborhoods where the people that are saying to defund the police live, which would punish the good people that follow law and order and don't want crime in their neighborhoods, and they don't want the gangs on their streets, and they don't want people shooting back and forth like every weekend in Chicago. I mean, you hear Black Lives Matter, but I don't see them ever protesting the violence in Chicago or other inner cities against each other. It's always when a cop or somebody else did this thing, or like in New York City where the white girl was killed by 3 black people in a drug deal gone bad or whatever it was. Nobody's really got the whole story there, but the 3 individuals pled guilty. There was no outrage. Nobody was screaming that it was racist. But when it's the other way around, it always is, because the media wants to spread this narrative, and groups like Antifa, who are using, if you see ACAB spray painted all over the place, that's mostly from Antifa doing this. Where this ACAB thing come, which means all cops are the B word, not the female dog one, but the fatherless child one. It's actually from skinheads. If you look this up on the internet, look up what ACAB means. I had to look that up. Unfortunately, I found out what it meant, and it had to do with white supremacy and skinheads and neo-Nazis, and this is what they use. I also had to look up what F-12 meant, which I learned has something to do with the narcotics divisions of police departments, which I had no idea, but I became more enlightened, and now I have much more knowledge, so I can better be informed to talk about these things. If you get rid of the police, the feds are going to step in, and then you won't have a police problem in your neighborhood, as you would like to think. You're going to have a militarized neighborhood with the National Guard and the U.S. military patrolling your neighborhoods in the inner city. Because in upper income and middle class neighborhoods and wealthy neighborhoods, those people are going to create militias and private security forces and their own police departments to protect their neighborhoods, as well as the people that live in those neighborhoods tend to be heavily armed to protect their property. I would suggest that also anyone who supports ending police, not call them if you have an emergency, and see how that works out for you. And on a final note, the pandemic lockdowns need to end. With thousands gathered in the streets for over a week now, against most states' lockdown orders on top of it, and and not very many social distancing and only some wearing masks, I would say we can gather in groups again and people can return to work and sporting events and movie theaters, casinos and the beach and churches and religious facilities and be able to go back to funerals, because why should one man get to have a memorial and funerals with lots of people, but the people that have been locked down during the pandemic haven't had that opportunity. A lot of them didn't even get to say goodbye to their family member, and a lot of them also probably said, I can't breathe, if they could speak at all, because a lot of them were in comas before they died. Just the sad reality of the coronavirus. And as the unemployment numbers showed us, that people should be able to return to work, like the 2.5 million unexpected job gains of people going back to work just last month in May. We'll also have to wait and see if all of these protests lead to an increase of COVID coronavirus cases. But we won't know that for another 1 to 3 weeks. Also, the bad elements of the looters and the rioters also showed why the Second Amendment exists and why people need assault rifles, as the left likes to call them. Most people just call them a rifle. They're not machine guns like the media wants you to think. You have to pull the trigger one at a time. You could shoot as many bullets with a handgun. If you have 2 handguns, you can shoot more bullets than what the left calls an assault rifle. Well, this has been the Trumped Up Podcast. It's been a few weeks since we did an episode. Remember, you can catch our podcast across all podcasting platforms, including Anchor Podcast, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart Podcasts, as well as many other platforms. You can catch us on Twitter. We just signed up with a new social media site for conservatives. It's called Parler, Parler. If you have a conservative view and you don't want to be shadow banned or blocked by Twitter or censored, go over to Parler and be more free. Follow us there. You can also follow us on Instagram. We are still on Twitter. And you can also go over and follow our page, Facebook podcast page, or join the Facebook podcast, the Trumped Up Podcast group on Facebook. And you can also go over and check us out on YouTube. All these podcasts are uploaded there relatively soon after the podcast. This is the Trumped Up Podcast. I'm Keith Rao, and I am out.